All right, welcome to this session of lectures and assignments from the Design and Build School of KMBUF.
Glad to be here.
This is your daily lecture for Sunday, December 14th, 2025. And today we're doing a really big week ahead outlook.
A very crucial one. This is for everyone in that integrated master's to PhD track. So architecture, civil engineering, planning.
Urban and regional planning, public admin, construction management, you're all in the right place.
And we are setting the stage for, I would say, the most foundational course in the entire doctoral journey.
That's RES 701, right?
Yep.
Research design, evidence, and methods.
That's the one. And the whole week really is dedicated to one big idea. We call it the move from questions to proof.
Okay, let's unpack that phrase, because this isn't about, just memorizing formulas for a statistics exam.
No, not at all.
For anyone on this track, this future master architect, builder, statesman we talk about, the real challenge is leadership. And in our world, in the built environment, the difference between a huge proposal that gets approved and one that just gets dismissed.
Called speculative fiction.
Right. The difference is the rigor of your method. That gap between a subjective opinion and, well, legitimate professional authority.
It's all method. It all comes down to evidence and method.
It's the essential leadership toolkit then.
Absolutely. We're trying to cultivate professionals who aren't just, consumers of academic papers. You have to be creators and commissioners of research.
So you need to be research literate enough to look at the data a consultant gives you and really scrutinize it.
Scrutinize the methodology for bias, and this is the crucial part. Translate those findings into things like building codes or public policy without adding your own flaws.
Okay, so the outline for the week has 5 core learning objectives. But instead of just listing them out, let's talk about where the real challenge is. Which one is the steepest climb? I'd argue it's the last one. Objective safe. 5, translating findings into action. Because that's when you leave the, let's call it the academic safe harbor.
And you hit political reality? That's a great point. That's definitely where the highest impact is. But I think the greatest initial difficulty, the place where most people stumble, is actually objective 1.
Formulating the question.
Formulating a truly researchable question. The tendency, you see it all the time, is to ask something way too broad, like, how can we make cities better?
Or the opposite, something way too narrow.
Right, like, what color paint performs best on the north wall of my current project? A doctoral question has to be significant enough to matter, but also framed so it's empirically answerable. That's the entire foundation.
I have to agree. Because if the question itself is flawed, it doesn't matter how brilliant your data collection is. You're just getting a brilliant answer to the wrong question.
Precisely.
So the roadmap for the week is clear. We start with framing the question, then selecting the right method, then establishing rigor, making sure it's all valid, and finally, that translation into real-world decisions.
That's the whole arc, from curiosity to accountability.
So let's start with that fundamental mindset shift. Because when you're operating at this level, at the architect, builder, statesman level, you just can't afford to rely on what feels right. We have to move past this idea of design intuition and start demanding empirical proof. What does that actually look like on the ground?
Well, design intuition is absolutely necessary. It's the engine of creativity, right? Lets you sketch a solution in 5 minutes that looks great and probably solves 80% of the problems.
It's the spark.
It's the spark. But when that solution means you're about to commit, say, hundreds of millions of dollars, or it affects public safety.
Like a new seismic dampening system.
Or mandating a new material for health reasons, intuition just isn't sufficient anymore. Empirical proof gives you the systematically verified evidence to minimize risk. Intuition is really a hypothesis. Proof is a verifiable conclusion.
I like how you visualize this in the notes with that progression. Anecdote to data to inference. Let's not just glance over that. Let's use a real-world problem, like the failure of a specific type of high-performance curtain wall system.
Excellent example.
Okay.
So the process almost always starts with the anecdote. A project manager calls the firm furious. Our brand new, super energy efficient curtain wall failed in the first big storm. We have massive water ingress.
That's a powerful story.
That single powerful story, it tells you there's a problem. But it doesn't tell you why it failed. Was it unique to that building? The climate? The installation crew?
It's good for starting a lawsuit, maybe.
But not for changing the building code. That's the key. So then you move to data.
Okay.
This means systematic measurement. You hire forensic engineers. They start collecting raw data humidity readings inside the wall, the thickness of the joint sealant, wind speeds from the storm, a spectroscopic analysis of the material.
A battery of tests.
Right. You get a huge pool of objective, quantifiable facts. But here's the trap a lot of people fall into. Raw data, by itself, is pretty meaningless without context.
What do you mean?
Well, a statistician will tell you that the fact that, say, 5% of all the welds failed doesn't tell you if the cause was the design, the crew, or a bad batch of material. It's just a number.
So the real doctoral level work, the intellectual leap, is that final step, the move to inference.
Exactly. Inference is where you apply systematic methods modeling, statistical analysis, maybe a rigorous case comparison, to interpret that data and draw a robust conclusion.
So you find a correlation.
You find a correlation to the data, let's say, between a specific sealant type and the failures. The inference is, this sealant, under these specific installation conditions, is structurally inadequate for this design. That inferred conclusion, that causal link, is what can actually change policy.
Your goal is always to climb that ladder.
Always.
Yep.
Operate in the domain of defensible, reproducible inference.
And operating there means you have to ask the right type of question from the very beginning. Because if your question is just exploratory, but you try to draw a causal inference from it,
You've just invalidated your whole approach. The method has to match the question.
which brings us to that question-to-method matching matrix diagram. These 4 question types really dictate everything else.
They do. Let's frame this with a really complex problem, like urban resilience. Specifically, how a city prepares for, say, a heat wave happening at the same time as a major power outage.
A concurrent event. So where do you start? The most open-ended approach, I assume.
You start with the exploratory question. With a problem like that, we might not even know what all the risks are. So the question becomes something like, what's the range of social, spatial, and technical vulnerabilities in the city's low-income housing during a concurrent heat wave and grid failure?
You're not testing a theory yet.
Not at all. You're basically generating a risk inventory. You'd probably use interviews, GIS mapping, digging through archival data. You're just setting the scope for more targeted research later on.
Okay, so once that's done, you've identified a specific vulnerability. Let's say it's a lack of passive cooling in older buildings. Then you need to figure out the why.
And that leads directly to the explanatory question. Now you're seeking cause and effect. You have to isolate variables.
So the question would be more like,
Does the presence of passive ventilation features, let's call that A, measurably reduce indoor air temperatures, B, during a power outage, independent of the building's age, C.
so you're controlling for variables.
You have to. This is central to building theory. This is where you'd use things like statistical regression analysis or controlled performance testing. You're trying to explain the mechanism.
Okay, next up. Let's say a city already did something. 10 years ago, they mandated green roofs. Now we need to know if it actually worked.
That's the classic evaluative question. You're assessing the efficacy of a policy or a design against its original goals. So, how effective have the city's green roof mandates been in reducing local heat island effects compared to the original environmental impact forecasts?
This is huge for policy feedback loops.
It's everything. If the green roofs are only reducing runoff by 10% when they were sold as reducing it by 50%, that policy needs a major, major redesign.
And finally, the forward-looking part. Taking what we've learned and planning for the next 50 years.
That's the predictive question. This is the world of simulation and modeling. A question like, based on current seismic data and projected climate impacts, what's the forecasted failure probability of the city's bridges under 2050 stress scenarios?
You're using the other research to build the model.
Exactly. You're using explanatory and evaluative findings to construct models that project future outcomes. And this is critical. If you get the explanatory part wrong, your predictive model is completely worthless. It's garbage in, gospel out.
That transition from the question type to the methodology itself brings us to the tool set. We're connecting this to the required reading from Creswell and Creswell. And the choice of method, it's not arbitrary.
It's an intellectual necessity. If your question demands a deep contextual understanding, the why behind the numbers, you have to lean qualitative.
We're talking non-numerical data here.
Narratives, detailed observations, the lived experience of a space. If you want to understand why residents are refusing to use the smart thermostats in their new net zero homes, you need to talk to them.
Statistics can only tell you that they aren't using them.
Right. Only qualitative work can explain the cultural or behavioral barrier that's in the way.
This brings up Fleibjerg's work, which is a required reading. He argues so fiercely for the power of the deep case study, but that seems counterintuitive, right? If you want to influence broad policy, don't you need huge sample sizes? How does one deep dive really prove anything?
That is the intellectual friction we have to embrace. Fleibjerg's argument is that statistical generalization, while powerful for measuring scale, often sacrifices understanding the mechanism.
The how and why.
Exactly. A single, critical case study, analyzed deeply, can provide insight that massive quantitative data completely misses. A qualitative case study can dislodge a common assumption. It might not prove a phenomenon is universal, but it can prove definitively that it's possible. And sometimes that's enough to force a total reevaluation of a standard.
So if qualitative is all about depth and context, quantitative is
Scale and statistical power. You need quantitative methods when you're trying to generalize findings across a large population or confirm causal links or model complex systems.
This is where the big data sets come in.
Right. Statistical analysis, large-scale simulations, dealing with the whole city's building permit database. If you're going to make a claim like 70% of new office towers are failing to meet their predicted energy targets, you need a statistically defensible sample. You can't base that on a few compelling anecdotes.
But the built environment is famously messy. It's not a clean laboratory. You have human behavior, technology, bureaucracy. That complexity seems like it would defeat a single pure method.
It often does. And that is precisely why mixed methods have become the professional reality for most doctoral work in our field.
It's what we noted in the practice questions. You combine them when one approach just isn't enough.
Perfect example. You could use a quantitative survey across 500 construction firms to measure the prevalence of safety violations. That gives you the magnitude of the problem.
The what?
The what. Then you follow up with deep qualitative case studies and interviews with 15 site supervisors to understand the organizational culture that allows those violations to persist. That gives you the why.
The meaning behind the numbers.
Mixed methods provide both magnitude and meaning. And for the architect, builder, statesman, that complete picture is what you need to actually intervene effectively.
Okay, so the moment you've picked your method, the challenge immediately shifts. It's no longer about asking the right question. It's about proving you got the answer right. This brings us to the metrics of trustworthiness, validity, and reliability, the twin pillars of rigor.
Reliability is the easier one to get your head around, I think. It's just consistency. If I use the same acoustic measurement tool on the same wall tomorrow, will I get the same decibel reading?
It has to be repeatable.
It's non-negotiable, but it's not enough. You could have a tool that is highly reliable, but is consistently measuring the wrong thing entirely.
And that's where validity comes in. We have to be sure we're measuring what we claim to be measuring. Let's break this down, starting with internal validity.
Okay, internal validity is basically your intellectual shield against doubt. It's about the soundness of the causal claims within your study.
Give me an example.
If you run a study and conclude that installing smart windows A leads to a reduction in energy load B internal validity, demands that you have convincingly ruled out all other possible causes.
Like founding variables.
Exactly. Did the reduction actually come from a sudden change in how many people were in the building? That's C. Or a city mandate that changed utility rates? D. Or maybe it was just an unusually mild year. E. If you don't control for C, D, and E, your claim that A causes B is internally weak. It's just correlation, not causation.
And the second type, which is often much higher stakes when we're talking about large-scale policy, is external validity.
Right. This is what we define as the generalizability of findings. This is all about the reach of your work.
How far does the truth travel?
That's a great way to put it. If you prove that smart windows reduce energy load in a super-specific controlled lab building on a campus in San Diego, can you generalize that finding to a commercial high-rise in downtown Chicago?
Probably not. The climate, users, energy grid, it's all different.
And a study with high internal validity, it proves causation in that one specific place. But low external validity is only valuable as, like, a footnote. It's not the basis for changing a national code.
But the second we try to make that leap, from a specific finding to a broad policy recommendation, we slam right into the danger of overgeneralization. And that leads to policy misuse. This is risk register item number 5. Why is it so high on the list?
Because the consequences are just immense. Policy misuse is what happens when a finding, often from a pilot program or a study with a non-representative sample, gets applied universally as if it's a silver bullet.
Do you have an example of that?
Sure. Imagine a study proves that flexible open-plan offices boost communication and productivity among a small, highly motivated tech startup staff.
Okay.
An overzealous politician reads the headline and then mandates that all new government buildings, from the tax office to the VA department, must adopt open plan designs to boost efficiency.
That sounds like a disaster.
It's a total disaster.
Yeah.
It fails to account for the need for privacy, for focused work, for all the specialized functions in those contexts. Good research methodology explicitly defines its own limitations to prevent policymakers from making that exact faulty leap.
This inherent risk in any applied research brings us straight to ethics. It's the non-negotiable foundation of all doctoral work.
And in the built environment, given the public consequences, ethical integrity is everything. We stress the 3 pillars: careful treatment of human subjects, transparent use of public data, and strict management of conflicts of interest.
If you're starting a new housing development and you're getting funding from the developer,
That conflict has to be managed, disclosed, and mitigated, no question.
and if the research involves gathering any information from people, even if you're just observing them in a public park, you have to get ethical approval.
That is the hard line. Ethical approval is legally and academically required when human subjects are involved. It's not a bureaucratic hurdle. It's a fundamental safeguard.
You have to submit a detailed protocol to an institutional review board, an IRB.
And you have to detail everything: how you'll get consent, how you'll protect privacy, especially with video or spatial data, and how you'll minimize risks to participants. Without that IRB sign-off, the research just can't proceed.
The guiding framework for all of this, of course, is the Belmont Report. It's worth pausing to just restate those 3 core principles.
The first is respect for persons. This ensures people enter research voluntarily, with adequate information. That's informed consent. It also demands extra protection for vulnerable populations: children, people with cognitive impairments, or even tenants being interviewed about their landlord.
People who might be subject to coercion.
Exactly. The second principle is beneficence. Put simply, the researcher has to maximize the potential benefits while minimizing potential harms. Is your data collection, say, intrusive home monitoring, overly burdensome for the participants, given the potential good the research might do?
And the third, which is maybe the most complex for us in public policy and governance, is justice.
Justice requires that the benefits and the burdens of the research are distributed fairly. You can't, for example, conduct all your studies on new energy standards in poor neighborhoods just because the data is easier to get.
Only for the benefits of those new standards to mostly enrich developers in wealthy areas.
Precisely. Justice forces us to make sure the people who bear the risks of participation are also the ones who stand to benefit from the findings.
This whole ethical and methodological minefield leads us right to the common danger zones. Let's make the research risk register really practical for everyone listening.
Okay, these are the 5 biggest reasons doctoral projects fail or get disqualified. Number 1, poor question framing leading to scope creep. That vague question, how can we make cities better? You spend 2 years just trying to define better and end up with a project that collapses under its own weight.
A tight question is the scaffolding.
It is. Without it, everything falls apart. Number 2, the silent killer of objectivity bias samples, leading to invalid conclusions.
And the sources are clear that this usually comes from either sampling errors or framing errors.
Right. A sampling error is when your study group just isn't representative. If you only survey people about public transit by talking to them at the main downtown terminal, you're missing everyone who doesn't go there. Your view is totally distorted.
And framing error.
That's when the language you use in your survey subtly pushes people toward an answer, asking, do you agree with experts that this efficient new method should be adopted? Is a biased question. You're not getting a real opinion.
Risk number 3, method mismatch. Using the wrong tool for the job.
You ask a cause and effect question, an explanatory one, and then you use interviews with 3 people as your only method.
Right.
You have a mismatch. The depth of that qualitative data just can't support the breadth of your causal claim. Your findings will be weak and get torn apart by reviewers.
Risk number 4 is the one that ends careers. Ethical lapse, resulting in disqualification.
This is the zero-tolerance zone. Falsifying data, misrepresenting findings, failing to get informed consent. Any serious violation will result in the immediate disqualification of your research, period.
And finally, we circle back to where we started this section. Overgeneralization, resulting in policy misuse.
This is a failure of scholarly humility.
Yeah.
You have to explicitly state the limits of your research. If your study was limited to mid-rise buildings in seismic zone 3, you have to say that. You have to declare that the findings don't necessarily apply to high-rises in zone 4.
Because failure to do so can lead to catastrophic policy decisions.
Absolutely. It's a fundamental lapse in professional responsibility.
Okay, so we've built this fortress of rigor and ethics. Now we have to talk about what happens when we open the gates and let the evidence out into the world. How does all this proof actually translate into the codes and standards that shape our environment?
This is the critical feedback loop, from research to code. And for the master architect builder statesman, understanding this four-step progression is absolutely essential. It goes from research to guideline to standard and finally to code.
And it's not a clean or quick process.
Oh, not at all. It's filled with bureaucratic friction and, frankly, political maneuvering.
So walk us through it. Let's say your doctoral research proves, definitively, that the current shear wall requirement in the building code for a specific material is inadequate for future wind loads.
Okay, that research doesn't just instantly change the International Building Code. First, it probably informs a non-mandatory guideline.
Recommendation.
A recommendation published by a trusted body, the AIA, a university, a research group. They issue a suggestion for best practice. It's advisory. It's not enforceable.
Then the jump from guideline to standard, this is where things get more solid, but it's still voluntary, right?
Exactly. Once that guideline gets widely accepted, verified by others, it can become a standard. This is a highly specific technical document published by a consensus organization like ASTM or ASE.
Like ASC 7 for design loads.
Perfect example. But a standard is just a reference document. A contractor doesn't have to follow ASCE 7 unless someone with legal authority tells them to.
And that legal authority is the final step.
That's when the standard becomes enforceable code. A government, a city council, a state legislature adopts the standard and incorporates it into a legal framework like the IBC. That's when it becomes a mandatory requirement.
And our sources highlight that research is what drives those updates to the IBC, ACE7LE.
Well, all of them.
Yeah.
When you see a major change in the energy targets in lead, you know that change was informed by years of quantitative evaluative research on actual building performance.
So our doctoral candidates have to see their research not just as an academic exercise, but as a potential input into that whole process. This brings us to the design to delivery research checklist.
Right. You have to analyze your project through the lens of performance and codes. First is the code and policy interface. Your research proposal needs to explicitly state, my research aims to inform a change to the AV 4.1 requirements for acoustics, or my work provides the evidence to challenge the ASC 7 requirement for X. You have to know which standard you're targeting.
Let's get specific on the performance metrics that need this level of scrutiny. Energy is always a big one.
With energy, you have to focus on EUI datasets and benchmarking validity. UI energy use intensity is the key metric. But if you compare your new library in Chicago to a benchmark that includes 20-year-old strip malls in Miami,
The comparison is meaningless.
it's invalid.
Yeah.
The benchmark population has to be comparable. Climate zone, building use, occupancy. Invalid benchmarking is often used to make poor performance look good, and a doctoral researcher has to be able to spot that.
What about the gap between what a model promises and what a building actually delivers? Daylighting is a great example of this.
That's the classic tension between simulation versus post-occupancy data. A simulation might promise amazing daylight penetration based on ideal assumptions. Perfect installation, predictable weather, rational occupancy.
Then you do a post-occupancy evaluation.
And the ground truth shows a massive delta. Doctoral research often quantifies that performance gap, showing where standard design assumptions consistently fail, which can lead to changes in the modeling software itself.
And for something like acoustics, the metrics are highly standardized.
They are, which simplifies the measurement but raises the bar for methodological rigor. When you're dealing with acoustics, you have to adhere to established measurement protocols, ASTM standards for calculating sound transmission class, and so on. It's a field where sloppy methodology is immediately obvious.
All of this work, this complexity, eventually gets resolved into the final product, the doctoral artifact.
The dissertation, the applied thesis, the policy report, this is your lasting contribution. And it has to connect back to that core framework from Grote and Wang, the absolute necessity of linking theory, method, and practice.
And that linkage is what gives it scholarly legitimacy. What do reviewers actually look for to see that connection?
Transparency. They want to see a clear, logical line, that the theoretical framework you chose logically informed the method you used, and that the findings from that method lead directly to practical, actionable recommendations.
It's all about the methodology section.
Above all else, a transparent methodology section suitable for peer review. You have to document everything. How you selected your sample, how you coded your data, what software version you used, every assumption you made. The possibility of replication is the hallmark of true rigor.
Okay, theory now meets the deadline. Let's talk about the practical assignment for the week. It's designed to force this synthesis into a concrete research concept and fast 90 to 120 minutes.
Yep. The deliverable is a 2-page research concept memo and a 1 diagram that maps the question to the method to the evidence. It's a high-speed prototype of a dissertation proposal.
And the first step, the first 30 minutes, is about scoping. Identify a problem.
Right. Find a specific real-world issue in design, construction, policy, something that demands a research-based resolution, not just another design idea. Maybe it's the chronic failure of new transit-oriented developments to actually achieve their social equity goals.
Then 20 minutes to draft a research question. It has to be answerable with evidence, not just opinion.
Then the critical justification step. Select and justify a method. This is where you have to show mastery, explaining why your chosen method is the superior tool for answering your specific question.
And if you choose mixed methods,
The justification has to be even stronger. A purely quantitative approach would miss the key behavioral mechanisms. Therefore, qualitative interviews are necessary to enrich the findings. Something like that.
And finally, the ethics and evidence check. This forces you to think about the messy logistics right from the start.
You have to identify your primary data sources. Are you using DOE energy data? You have to note its biases. Census data. You have to account for underreporting. And most importantly, do I need IRB approval for this, or am I only using public anonymized data? That one question defines so much of your project's timeline and risk.
Now let's talk about the evaluation rubric. The weighting tells a story about what this program prioritizes.
It does. The highest weighting is design technical framing at 40%. This confirms that in our field, intellectual rigor has to be anchored in the physical, engineered reality of the world. A beautiful question about urban theory that ignores material science is going to score poorly here.
And the second highest, code's performance cost awareness at 25%, pushes the research into the realm of the actionable.
The research has to be conversant in the regulatory and economic environment. It's not enough to show a new material works. You have to show it's cost-effective enough to be adopted and can influence existing standards.
With the rest being research communication and ethics community.
Those are essential minimums. But technical relevance and financial viability are what drive the proposal, with ethics as the absolute baseline for entry.
Let's shift to logistics. The tools and the money. What do our candidates need to be proficient in?
For software and methods, proficiency in a citation manager like Zotero or Mendeley is mandatory. That's just basic organization. Quantitatively, advanced Excel is the baseline, with an introduction to SPS or RR for complex modeling.
And for qualitative data.
NVivo is the industry standard for coding interviews and textual data. Methodologically, mastering literature review matrices and logic models helps structure the whole process from day one.
And the raw material, the data sets.
The core sources are often public. DOE energy data is essential. Census data provides the demographic and spatial context, and increasingly, municipal open data portals are gold mines. They offer real-time, granular data on everything from permitting to waste management.
Finally, the mini pro forma. Research is a funded endeavor. Let's break down CapEx versus OpEx.
Right. CapEx, your capital expenditure, is the one-time long-term investment. This is buying proprietary data, permanent software licenses, specialized field equipment like drones or monitoring systems, travel for site visits, and hiring research assistants.
And OpEx is the ongoing operational expenditure, the sustaining costs.
OpEx includes your recurring costs, cloud data storage fees, annual software renewals, publication costs, which can be significant for open access journals, and ongoing compliance monitoring, like IRB reporting. And critically, you need a contingency fund.
Because something always goes wrong.
Something always goes wrong.
And that brings up the PPT note, public-private partnerships.
A crucial mechanism. Research partnerships with external agencies, a developer, a city utility, a government regulator, are invaluable. They accelerate the adoption of your findings. And just as importantly, they help share the costs of data, compliance, and fieldwork, making much more ambitious research feasible.
We've established that research in the built environment has these profound, long-term public consequences. So technical rigor has to be framed by ethical responsibility. This is the equity ethics checkpoint.
It's the final filter. It forces the researcher to shift from thinking about internal methodological rigor to external societal consequences. We use these 5 community review prompts for any research concept.
Let's run through them. Number 1, who benefits and who is harmed or excluded?
If your research proves a new material is superior but it costs 3 times as much, its benefits will be monopolized by high-end luxury construction. It effectively excludes the majority of the population. You have to assess these distributional effects up front.
Number 2, how transparent are the assumptions?
This is about intellectual honesty. If your pedestrian flow model assumes all users are physically fit and mobile, you have to state that assumption clearly. Hidden assumptions are a form of data manipulation.
Number 3, which is so vital now, can the findings be misused?
This is about anticipating the negative consequences of your own success. Research on optimizing traffic flow with surveillance cameras is great for congestion. But that same system could be misused for targeted policing or social control. You have a responsibility to anticipate and flag that potential for misuse.
Number 4, how will the results be communicated publicly?
A dense journal article is inaccessible to most city planners and community leaders. You have to plan for knowledge, transfer visualizations, policy briefs, executive summaries to make sure the evidence reaches the people who need it, including the communities affected.
And the 5th ties it all together.
Right. Does the research risk reinforcing systemic inequities? It forces a final check on that justice principle from the Belmont Report.
This holistic review is what keeps the focus on stewardship. Let's close with the leadership minute, the philosophy that elevates method from just a hurdle to a professional imperative.
The core idea is that evidence is a form of stewardship. A leader who acts on gut feeling for a massive public works project is gambling with public resources and safety. They are failing in their duty of care.
But on the other hand, a leader who hides behind dense, opaque data to avoid making a judgment call is also failing.
They're abdicating judgment. The true leader respects the evidence, but interprets it wisely and translates it transparently.
So the true power of mastering research methods.
It's not about passing an academic hurdle. These methods are the verifiable means by which our professional values become measurable, and by which power, the power to design, build, and legislate our environment, becomes accountable.
Legitimacy doesn't come from having a grand vision.
It comes from being able to explain, with absolute methodological transparency, not only what you propose, but how you know it will work, and what the limits of that knowledge are.
That brings us to the close of this outlook. So, for the week ahead, the preparation items are clear. Read the assigned chapters, start working on that question method matchup, and integrate those ethical considerations right into your 2-page concept memo.
Remember that 4-step progression from research to code, and keep that research risk register handy. The goal is to design a project that isn't just academically sound, but practically defensible in the real world.
Next up, on Monday, we move from theory to practice. We transition directly into the studios with the Urban Systems Studio. Program, power, and spatial strategy.
We'll take these methods and apply them to the chaos of the city.
And finally, a provocative thought for you to carry into your week. The highest goal of mastering research methods is not just generating a finding. It's ensuring that the policies and the physical structures we build from those findings are defensible, transparent, and accountable to the public good.
That is a non-negotiable necessity for any true master architect, builder, statesman. Go deep, prepare rigorously, and we will see you in the studio.